good evening, depending on where you're joining us from today. We are excited to welcome you to our Fun Friday live stream. And today we are going to talk about the components of system architecture, which has become more of a really mainstream trend within the digital transformation industry and something that's often overlooked in project planning and execution. So today, joining me, I'm very excited to welcome Mitch Ottoson, who is a consultant on our side, a senior consultant who has an expert background in system architecture and how all integrations and data talks to each other. So we're going to have an informal conversation around that today. Few logistics, we can see all of your chat messages in whatever platform you're joining. So feel free to pop questions or engage in the comments as well. And we will ask Mitch those questions live today. To test that feature, we'd love to hear where you're joining us from. We do have a huge global audience here at Third Stage. So we'd love to hear where you're joining and tuning in from today. So with that, Mitch, do you want to give us a quick introduction of what you do here at Third Stage and your background?
Sure, I'd be happy to. First, thank you for having me. Very excited to talk to you today. So Mitch, I'm a manager of strategy and transformation. And a lot of my background is really just walking in between business challenges with IT solutions. And a lot of that then pours into the architecture and design and just making sure that we're together solutions in a thoughtful way for clients after they've chosen a technology or as they're going through their selection. We like to evaluate and just make sure that the technology will fit within their existing ecosystem and that there are no major challenges that we need. There oftentimes are.
And I think system architecture is so unique in the sense that sometimes in a digital transformation project, it may be overlooked on the vendor side or in the sales side. So can you
Right.
kind of explain the importance of having that consideration within the software selection phase?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think an example is the best way to do that.
Mhm.
There are a lot of solutions that we've been looking at with clients where they basically just want to plug in and hope that their integrations will work. With modern APIs, oftentimes a logical assumption, but then when you peel back the onion a few layers, you find out that my HR system actually doesn't have an open API to allow the transfer back and forth to a new ERP to show the journal entries for payroll or for any of the spend that takes place in my HR system. So that's a very common one that I actually ran into very recently. The customer had, I believe it was Paycom, payroll information and plug it into their ERP. So they actually had to replace their entire payroll system to get to the full benefits of what they're looking for. That was outside of them, but that was because of a significant lack in the existing technology that they had that they really didn't even consider.
Absolutely. And you make such a good point. Just because you have an API doesn't mean it's an effective API, right? If
Mm-hmm.
the data doesn't transfer over or create actionable insights for you to make the best decision as an organization, that's something that you need to make sure that you check. So from
Yeah.
just a definition perspective, can you explain the difference between system architecture and system design?
Yeah. So I think everyone has a little bit of a different example and definition for those terms. They're pretty broad and thrown around a lot, but I like to look at it where architecture really is a little bit of a higher level, where it's looking at the systems and what data lives in what system and um, what you need to do to get the actual tactical figuring out how that's going to happen. Is it going to be with an API that your team creates, or you need to find a third-party solution like a Boomi or a MuleSoft to put those things together? So that's where the design really is. The execution of the architecture is how I like to look at it. And everyone like takes a little bit of a different approach, but that's the one that
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we use the house example here at Third Stage quite a bit. It's almost
Yeah,
like the design of your house is the interior design, right? The architecture is how does the plumbing and the electric and the heating and the HVAC and all of those different things, how do they work together to make sure you have a positive experience and you can drink water in your house?
right.
So those types of things. So just like building a house, it's so important to think through all of those different integrations. Can you talk about how organizations tactically, excuse me, as I said in our last live stream, my kids went to school and brought home a cold for the entire family. So it's a family affair. So bear with me here on that side. But can you kind of explain to us how organizations can tactically understand their system architecture? Because I think that's one of the biggest barriers is actually having that visibility into those integrations or that full system audit.
Yeah, absolutely. I always like to start with a diagram, and also, and in that diagram, I like to look at where do these things live, and what are the key data fields that are within for a specific flow or business use case that I'm trying to solve for. Have data, and you don't realize that it is actually fed from another system. So when you're replacing an underlying system, and you don't know where your data is coming in from, you need to make sure it's compatible with the other systems that the data actually resides in. So I like to look at where the inputs are and what the outputs are and where the outputs are used downstream.
Absolutely. And can you I want to ask the audience too, and I'll show we have our global audience joining us today. We've got some European, um, and then also some Texas, a few other here in the United States and globally as well. So welcome, turning back to the audience. But I want to ask you and the audience this question. What is the most important data point in an organization?
Ooh, that's a good question. Now, you cut out a little bit on my end. Are you putting that out for the folks on the chat, or do you want me to try and tackle that one?
I want, and I know we're having a few connectivity issues, which is fine. You know, live stream is what it is sometimes. But I asked you and the audience to answer, and you know me, I always like to mix it up on the questions. Put it to Eric. He usually says it depends, which I'm sure you'll say too, because that's our consultant answer to everything. But just thinking of what that looks like and the prioritization of those data points.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head with it depends. I'd say that at least 20 times a day. But that really just gets what's important to you as a business. So when I've worked with clients before, sometimes their customer data is the most important data, and that's the lifeblood of their
Mhm.
organization and what it is that they're trying to solve for with the transformation. So getting those customer insights that are then that's their most important data. For some others, it's margin and making sure their entire life of customer and doing it profitably. And there was a transformation we went through where we made that information readily available. That was a big change for that organization because they really opened things up for their entire staff to see how much they were making given product, and then that would negatively impact the profit of the sale, which was something that they were
Mhm.
really struggling with. They couldn't explain why, but they were losing money that just made no sense. And open up the hood, you were able to see that there were non-value add activities that really just eroded their margins. So they opened it up, and
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great way to look at it. So looking under the hood, which you know is your main job, right? When it comes to system architecture, what are some main failure points that many times clients overlook?
can you say that one more time? That one cut out on me.
Yeah, no worries. So, what are some main failure points you see within system architecture that that clients often overlook?
I would say that a lot of times the customizations that have been done in another, putting that data into another system incredibly difficult. So a lot of the are built in a way to support fields that come in organically through the system. And so when you go in and you customize a field in a way where it's hard coded in, and then you try and take that the output of that customization and transfer it over, we see that failing a lot of times. And then and putting in a manual process to either have that information in, which is not ideal, or
Mhm.
they'll extract it from a spreadsheet, manipulate it in Excel, and then plug it in their system, and allowing for that integration that would have our clients go towards.
Absolutely. And when it comes to those pieces, those manual inefficient processes,
Mm-hmm.
what's the relationship and balance between customizing a software solution and then changing your business processes? Because we know that there has to be a medium to meeting the technology where it is, but also understanding that you need to own your business processes and understand what's going to be most effective for your business.
Yeah. So again, going back to my standard stock consultant answer, it depends. And it depends on what we've seen is, what is this a competitive differentiator for you? And the reason that the software doesn't support it is because it's so unique and so special to you? Or is this just an interchange? And so having those looking introspectively and to understand and decide which one of those buckets it falls into is a difficult task, but it's a really necessary one to make sure that your technology is actually supporting your business processes and your ability to scale and use technology efficiently versus what's comfortable in the way that you've done it.
I think we should print what you just said on a t-shirt or tattoo it on, your body or something like that. But I think
I'll take a
that's so
t-shirt, please.
important to understand. Yeah, right, right. You pick the t-shirt instead of the tattoo. I understand. I understand. Absolutely. But I think that's so important when it comes to understanding your competitive advantage in the marketplace versus what a software vendor might push on you as far as customization and the need for all of your systems to work together. So I want to show a comment here from Jose on YouTube that's joining us today from Portugal. Profitability analysis is a good highlight, as you mentioned. So let's dig into that. How many clients, or can you give us kind of an example of a client that, because of the limited visibility to data in their system architecture, were they losing money and not understanding how to optimize their profitability?
Yeah. That really is a touchy subject. And this conversation comes up a lot where they don't want to expose that information to their staff. They feel like that is for management eyes only, and that someone could take that potentially proprietary information and go elsewhere with it. So it is a touchy subject. There's a bit of trust and risk that goes into really opening and exposing that, but in my opinion, it's far riskier to trust your people to run a business with a blindfold on than it is to give them the information that they need to execute and extending trust. And our clients that have done so have found real with it. They've been able to identify where there are unnecessary spend. They've been able to identify where there are inefficiencies in their process because really they're allowing their smart people that are on their staff to look at the data that comes from the output of a digital transformation and do something about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's levels, right, to that transparency, but having that overall open door is going to create a culture of digital transformation and a data consuming culture. So, how important is culture when it comes to understanding and activating system architecture?
I mean, I think it's really important. I think that a system that is completely locked, um, what's the point? The Earth things, the idea is to bring relevant information to the right people. Now, I'm not saying open up everything for everyone. You have to be thoughtful in what you're doing. But if there's really critical information that can help someone to do their job better, I especially think in this really competitive labor environment, open things, let them see what's going on. Think critically through what's happening, and you'll get the most out of your employees by doing it that way. I just don't really think that there's a good alternative, even though I understand it's risky.
Absolutely. And I think there's something to be said for empowering with data. There may be ways to kind of fence off access and understanding what's appropriate for management, what's appropriate for front lines, but creating an overall identity as a business that we utilize data to make the best decisions for the business as possible, I think goes a long way. And system architecture is really the fundamental need to be able to give that frontline access to that important information.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And actually, I had a client that they had different groups, they had siloed data, and they
Mhm.
were making decisions off of what was on the surface the same. It was deliveries on time, and the different groups had access to different data, which got them to a different answer, deliveries on time. And they were making decisions that counteracted each other based on that same metric that was being calculated differently. And so if you have that, we talk about the single source of truth, but it's also access to relevant information from the other groups that you may not know is relevant.
Absolutely. And that is huge. And that brings me to a really good question and a key point here. Can you have executive alignment around any digital transformation or even a business strategy project without an effective system architecture?
Right. Yeah, I mean, you really you can't do it. You need to drive that visibility into what is the data, where does it come from, what are we doing with it, and how can we bring that visibility that we're looking for. Then you get into the design, and you're actually going to go about executing this and making it work. Because the architect guy work in a perfect world, it can get a little hairy sometimes, but I
Yeah.
think once you've identified the problems, and you can solve technologies, and you can't do that without the right architecture.
100%. And so let's talk about the third stage of system architecture. You've selected the most effective software, you've integrated all of your different systems to optimize your data management and data consumption plans. How do you make sure and set expectations that the workforce is using that new actionable data within their day to day business operations?
Yeah, that's a good question. A lot of times we've done, and that really my approach that I like to take with my clients, because it's a living, breathing thing. Live, that's when you're able to, I think that you go live with about 80% of the functionality that you're looking for. No one goes live with 100%. So constant evaluation, reevaluation, and checking in on things. As you unleash the power of your system, your fully integrated system, you're going to identify other areas of opportunity for process improvement for at least a few months after, and then 6 months after, and then a year after you go live on. What do we sense? Is there an opportunity? You have to get the fundamentals down, but then you can really do some pretty advanced, sophisticated things once you have your bases covered.
Absolutely, 100%. Well, in the last 5 minutes here, I want to kind of talk about some action steps that a business can go through in their digital transformation to ensure that they have effectively addressed their system architecture. So, what are some top three tactics or strategies that organizations can undergo to ensure that they have that set for success?
The first place that I would have any clients start at step zero, as we like to call it, is understand your environment. So look at what are my critical data elements, where are they coming from, and what other systems use them or could value from using them down the road. Action immensely to know, hey, these two systems don't really talk well together. Worth it to me that the integration isn't as strong as it needs to be. Sometimes the answer is yes, sometimes the answer is no. So really just understanding your key critical data point, where you'd like them to be used. Understanding your environment. Are there a lot of customizations within your environment today that might make a data transfer difficult? And then also taking a look at your team. Where are your strong, and taking a good look at, if you were to take on a digital transformation, I've worked with clients that have really strong API teams. So they weren't scared by the fact that the systems are difficult to integrate because they felt confident in open APIs. They can make it work. They just aren't staffed. They have more networking and hardware focused IT. In that case, you probably need to go with a pretty out of the box API environment that really is pretty easy, that any standard consultant could come in and take care of that for you. So it's understanding what you're good at, understanding your data, and understanding your existing systems and the customizations.
Absolutely. I think those are three really good points. And that awareness is really key in the project leadership. Alignment is really
Mhm.
key to all of the different things that you said. So thank you so much for joining us today, Mitch. It's always great to have you. And thank you to
Of
our
course.
audience for joining our Friday live stream. So we do live streams every Tuesday with Eric Kimberling, our CEO here at Third Stage, on his channels. And then we also do our Fun Day Friday live stream as well. But thank you so much for interacting with us and joining us today. And we will see you next week.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.